we wanted to kick off this event with a very special conversation, so I called in some favors, right? I've got three incredible people who are about to come to the stage, and we're going to talk about really the potential in the sports business space, what's coming next. You'll hear a little bit more about what they're working on. It's going to be a fun conversation. So I'm going to ask Mike Fonseca, I'm going to ask Christine Simmons, and I'm going to ask Kyle Biagas to come up to the stage, and we're going to kick this off right now. Thank you. So first, I'm going to start with Christine and ask you to talk a little bit. I mean, so here's the thing about Christine that you guys don't necessarily know. So Christine used to run the LA Sparks, and she used to be the CEO over at the Motion Picture Academy. So when we talk about sports and entertainment, this is somebody who's got her finger on the pulse of everything, right? So y'all are getting the information straight from the source, right? Okay, Christine, first of all, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Could you talk a little bit about some of the trends that you've been seeing over the last couple of years and where you see that there might be a crack of opportunity for new business opportunities?
Yeah, and good morning, you guys. We need your energy, and we're going to give you the energy too, but I know it's early, and thank you. We got one. I got one. It's fine. No, but, I'm so excited about all of the interconnectivity, the immersive experiential that we're seeing, but moreover, the disruption within both sports and entertainment, right? And we're seeing these athletes understand their value and their empire in ways that are creating generational wealth, in ways that are changing trajectories, in ways that are impacting the industry that we've never seen before. So I think those are our opportunities, right? Because they are the ones with the platform, they're the ones with the talent, and so they're the ones who will continue to make the biggest effect. We're seeing the athletes themselves and their brand start to lead the conversation, the marketing efforts, the fan experiences, right? And the growth of market share that each of these teams and franchises and leagues have. So I think, and we saw it at the Sparks, because a lot of times, we had folks that followed their college female teams, women's teams, and then for some reason they fell off. They didn't follow the professional women's teams as much. But when we were able to get our superstars to be able to push it forward and bring their own individual fan base along, they brought their fan base from college, they brought their fan base from their hometowns, they brought their fan base from overseas, which is global, right? Then that gave the franchise more market share and more marketability as well, because then we are in a lot of different platforms. So I think that's where we see it truly is within the actual athlete themselves and getting them more involved in the business of the ecosystem of sports, because the more they're involved, the more they'll be able to push things forward for everybody involved. And that's what we need, is the entire ecosystem working in regards to pay equity and market share and all of those things. If the whole ecosystem isn't involved, then we're going to continue to fail and make the same mistakes over and over again.
So it's interesting you say that, because obviously with the smaller fan bases in certain sports, right? These emerging sports that are growing in popularity very quickly, you see that they're incorporating their athletes more and more into trying to get them to connect with fans, trying to do more things to build the popularity of the sport. And you saw all of the professional sports do that during the pandemic, right? When there were no sports happening for a little while, all of a sudden you saw all these athletes on social media and so on. What's the landscape for that? Like, how is it tricky to get athletes engaged in promoting their sports? Is it something that's really straightforward? Like, what does it take?
It starts with trust, right? It starts with, again, and I'm going to use disrupt so many times, it's going to become a drinking game. I'm just kidding. Shots of coffee, y'all. But I think it starts with trust, right? Your athlete has to trust that the franchise has their best interest in mind. I mean, it's kind of like your HR department, right? Like, HR is kind of there for the company, but they're supposedly there for you. Well, that franchise could trade that player at any point in time, right? So it's this beautiful dance that they have to do. But if they understand that the franchise and the league and the ecosystem system is there for the mutual benefit of both, that's where you see the true engagement, because then they understand, and it's benefiting them while benefiting the teams and the industry as well. But it's got to start with trust. If the trust isn't there, then they're tapping out, and they're like, especially now, because they're so educated and so informed and so brilliant, that it's got to start with trust.
I'll say something about, because it's interesting. I worked representing baseball players for many, many years, and still do. But for many years, the union, the MLB Players Association, was very, very protective of their athletes. Right? They didn't want to give any kind of exposure. And if you notice, baseball was really the last to innovate when it came to access, in-game, after-game. They were very, very protective of those athletes, and frankly, they were lagging behind every other sport until very recently, in the last couple of years, the union and MLB came to an agreement and said, listen, we really need your guys to be accessible, even in-game, right? To the point where maybe it's a little too much sometimes.
Yeah.
But that's really changed the game for baseball, because now fans are like, hey, you know what? I get to know what's going on. I get to know the managers, the players, and it goes back to trust, right? You had to realize that this is for the betterment of the game of baseball. It wasn't necessarily for the betterment of the team or the league. It was the game overall. And players are benefiting significantly, and you see that with baseball.
Yeah, and just one additional point. Trust is critical for sure, but I think the other aspect that we haven't really talked about is that there's a individual incentive to do this. There's a financial incentive. The bigger, the more active you are on social media, the more out there you are, to the public. That's going to enhance your brand, and that's going to create opportunities for you in the marketing and sponsorship space.
So can you stay on that? Because I know you're also not just sports, but esports. You just mentioned social media. Can you talk a little bit more about the ways in which you can amplify fandom through social and some of these direct connections?
Yeah, I think esports does it in a way that really is a game changer, and it'll be interesting to see if it ever transitions into traditional sports. But you think about streamers who are playing a game and communicating with the fans simultaneously while they're playing the game. You're doing your actions. You're talking to your fans about why you're doing, why you made that decision. Why you're making this move, and they're talking back to you. And think about like a situation where you have LeBron James bringing the ball up for the Lakers, and he's mic'd up and he's saying like, okay, I'm gonna fake toward the screen, and then I'm gonna cut left. I'm gonna drive into the middle. The defense is going to collapse. I'm going to kick to the corner where Anthony Davis is going to be waiting for an 18-footer. And he's talking to the fans while this is happening. Like, that's game-changing. And, eventually, traditional sports is going to catch up to where esports is in terms of the level of communication between the fans and the athletes. And I think that's going to be, hugely impactful.
And I think there's layers on layers on layers of revenue streams, right? So if you think about traditional sports, you have ticket sales, sponsorship, media deals, right? But now we're looking at, okay, then you get the esports in there, and there's all of those things inside the game as well, right? Then it's amazing how much you can monetize in this time and space of Web3, of AI, of all of these different aspects, and our athletes know it. And so I love how we continue to develop these additional revenue streams, where the team itself oftentimes is just a vanity play. It's all the tangential revenue streams and businesses that are created, the content that is both king and queen, is actually that which is creating so many opportunities for more revenue for all.
Yeah, the athletes really have become in a lot of instances, they're bigger than the brands that they play for. I think we're going to continue to see that grow.
Speaking of king and queen, I just wanted to make one quick important note. If you notice these really bright lights and you see Christine's ring, anyone notice her ring? I just wanted to call a little attention to that.
I love you. Thank you. I'll pay you for that later. Yes, this is our 2016 championship ring that I got to help design as well. So yes, thank you.
Love that. Love that. So Mike, when we talk about, you started this conversation about Major League Baseball and the athletes becoming more available, right? And Christine talked about layers and layers, right? Can you talk a little bit more about what you see as future fan experiences or future business opportunities that may emerge as we see more collaboration between leagues, teams, athletes, and brands?
So, middle of the pandemic, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 months into it, I get a call from a good buddy of mine. His name was John Klein. And John Klein was the president of CNN. for many, many years. But before that, he was the gentleman that brought CBS March Madness streaming. Okay, so pretty innovative, pretty big deal, obviously changed all of our lives. So John says to me, he called me Fonzie. Fonzie, I got a question for you. And you're the first call I'm making here. I got an idea, and I think it's crazy, but I want to get your perspective on it. He says, what if you could watch live sports on TV at home on your 80-inch flat screen TV, but while you're doing that, you're watching it with your favorite legends. So you're watching a Giants game, New York Giants game, and you're watching with Eli Manning and Sean O'Hare on a Zoom, and you're interacting, you're talking about the game, and he goes, would guys do that? And I go, dude, would guys do that? We're doing it right now. We're doing these, virtual Zooms, and the whole pandemic was all, how many Zooms and virtual Zooms can you do? And I go, how about this? Well, I'll call Eli, I'll ask him to do us a favor, and let's do it. Let's just see what happens, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen until we do it. So called Eli, said, this crazy idea. He's like, let's do it. So we watched the Giants game. I called 30 of my buddies. I live in Connecticut. I called 30 of my friends and said, listen, you guys are Giants fans. Here's a link. You're going to watch the game with Eli Manning. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, just show up. So we watched the game with Eli and Sean O'Hare. Had an amazing experience. People on the Zoom could talk, ask questions, what's going on. And we realized it wasn't really just about the X's and O's. It was about everything else, right? Yep. So we get off the call and Eli says, God, Fonzie, that was a really cool experience. Like, what's the story? I'm like, well, this is a beta, and we're going to go raise some capital. So we raised some capital. The company's called Hang. John Klein's the CEO. They've had a lot of success. And then Eli basically took that to his brother and said, hey, let's do it for ESPN. So that became the Manningcast. So that to me is one example of innovation, opportunity, technology. Now, there's some things that are going to continue to evolve from that, and it's not the first time it had been done, but the premise of Hang was one central marketplace for all sports, all entertainment events with that experience. And so they're well on their way, and again, it takes a guy like John Klein, super innovative, who's been innovating his entire career to create opportunity.
Wow. So Hal, what Mike just said makes me think about some of these generational differences, right? Because we start off with the whole like 80-inch TV. First of all, you understand that if people are under 30, they don't have an 80-inch TV because they don't care.
I don't have an 80-inch
right.
TV.
It's not happening.
Fonzie, can I come over and watch the game?
Right. It's just not happening, right? If they want to see something that on a screen that big, they'll go to a bar, right? Otherwise,
just sell your phones, ring and tablets. You can afford an 80-inch TV.
Never.
So we see now a lot of small screen activity where the small screen is the primary screen. We see this simultaneous, you mentioned the Zoom hang, like we see this simultaneous kind of side engagement, this shoulder experience that's going on alongside some of these sporting events. We see social media flattening the perceived relationship between the athletes and teams and the fans. And we see this culture that's now growing up around interactive media, a lot of video games, esports, metaverse, et cetera, where people are used to kind of interacting with each other and their content in different ways. So, with all of that in mind, Hal, I want you to help us see what some of the opportunities may be kind of on the horizon when we start thinking about the emerging fan base, the fans that are right now under 35.
That's a lot to unpack, Jay. Look, I think it's interesting, first of all, when we talk about TVs. I have a 20-year-old daughter who's a junior in college, and every time she's home and I'm not, she has to call me to ask if she wants to watch something on TV, how it works. So she's all on her laptop or her iPad or her phone. So I think that's going to be the biggest change. We don't watch and consume sports in the same way that those of us who are a little older grew up consuming it. Younger fans also don't go to games as much, and maybe that'll change as they get older and they have more disposable income. But that's another big change. In esports, people really don't attend events. Like they'll go to a championship, like a world championship or the nationals or something. But everyone's watching on their stream. So that's going to be a big change. And we've already seen like the fragmentation of sports. Now things are moving to streaming. With the collapse of the regional sports networks, we're going to see how that plays out in basketball and baseball and hockey this season. But the marketplace is changing in dynamic ways, and I don't know that I know what's going to happen next, but it's not going to look anything like it's looked in the past. And I think that just younger fans are going to, it's going to be much more micro-targeted viewership. And, we'll still see the big events. People are still going to watch the World Cup and the Super Bowl and things like that. But, people watching, 15 million people watching NBA championship is probably not going to happen anymore. Not not during gameplay on television. They'll be watching on, on their mobile device or on their laptop.
I want to say one thing. You referenced your daughter. My 11-year-old son, Jake, Brooks is my 13-year-old. When he was a little bit younger, I would wake up in the morning. He had already watched the full Sports Center, and he had downloaded me on what my clients had done the night before. So it was a sort of great, nice cheat sheet for me. Jake, my 11-year-old now, by the time he's now watching, I think they're 15-second highlight clips on the MLB app. He's watching the 15-second clips, and not only that, he's fast-forwarding through 15-second clips, because the 15-second clips is way too long for his attention span. So I don't get it, but that's the next generation, and that's what everyone obviously is catering to that. I think it's incredible.
I would also add that, that shoulder content that you alluded to, that is what is really taking off. Like we saw what Kevin Hart and Snoop Dogg did for the Olympics, right? If y'all didn't watch that on Peacock, you have to tune in. It was hilarious. And so it's bringing visibility and a new lens to different sports that might not get the same shine that others did. And that type of shoulder content not only adds, again, additional revenue streams. I'm all about the money, y'all. Additional revenue streams. It gives more platforms for more people to be involved and to engage where and how they want to be engaged. It also drives inclusivity. We, at the Oscars for our show, one of the things that we made sure to do was have kind of a shoulder content, because we couldn't integrate it into the show at the time, for those that might be hearing impaired, or for those that need visual descriptions, and for any other type of disabilities that want to enjoy the show in the same way, right? So we did that, and again, another revenue stream, we got it sponsored, right? So those are those opportunities that you can continue to do while you're growing that individual sport and league's visibility, but also creating and monetizing while you do it.
And just one other thing, is these guys help me crystallize my thoughts a little bit. It's interesting to me the way that we're sort of moving, where broadcasters are moving to, they're voluntarily splintering their audience. We talked about the Manning cast. All those games, all those viewers used to just be watching ESPN to watch Monday Night Football. Now they're watching ESPN 1 or ESPN 2. The Manning cast, pretty soon there'll be somebody else that's doing another cast. We see it with streaming choices. We see it with March Madness, where, instead of all the games being on CBS, or TBS, they're on Turner and TNT and TBS and what's the other one? True TV, and they're like so. Broadcasters are recognizing that audiences want different things, and they're giving into them, even though they may be ultimately costing themselves a little bit in the bottom line, because they're not going to be able to drive those advertisers to one site and charge maximum value.
But I think that helps the health of their organization, right? Because now they can diversify their portfolio. And it's pretty public knowledge, but for the longest time, the Oscars had 97% of their revenue coming from one source, their contract with ABC. Right? And so if we're looking at the business of running an organization, a franchise, right, the days of media rights being your sole source of income, right, is completely changing and being what? Disrupted. But that being said, as they are splintering it, they are diversifying their revenue streams as an entity, and that's smart business, right? So it gives more opportunity as long as they know how to promote it. But what I find intriguing is that live sports still is part of the most watched on TV.
Okay, so I did a little time check, and I know we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. So I'm going to check with you all to see if anybody has a question. Oh, I see somebody's a brave soul. Hold on, here we go.
Did Taylor Swift change the dynamics of football forever?
She certainly increased market share, right? So I'll equate it to what we did at the Sparks. There was a lot of people who weren't excited about women's basketball, right? There was unfortunately, there was even some women that weren't basketball fans, right? So instead of having them enter the door through fundamental, beautiful, artful basketball, which is the WNBA, we had them enter the door through an entertaining experience that they could have with their children, right? We had them enter the door of badass, empowered women who were running shit on the court and off the court, right? We had them enter the door through disposable income and millennials who want to understand the values of the organizations of where they spend their money. So in a much more pop culture kind of way, that's what Taylor did, right? So there is a ton of viewers now who could care less about the sport of football, but because they might see Taylor, both young and old, now we're generating, and I'm gonna be real, y'all, I love sports. I fell in love with the Dallas Cowboys because the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders were on Love Boat. Okay, I'm that old.
I remember that.
I'm that old. Okay, so that's.
Do you remember the made-for-TV movie?
Yes.
With Bucky Dent.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Right. So that's how I fell in love with football, and I'm now a Rams fan. We'll just go with that for now. But I love football now. But that was the door that I entered. So there's going to be a lot more football fans, both young girls and young boys that tuned in to see Taylor. But now they're going to become fans.
Ooh, another one. Okay, here we go.
Hi, Christine. My name's Nam. I'm with NFL Media. There's a bunch of young women here from Anderson School of Business, UCLA Law School, or undergrad, and they're looking to break into sports. And you're an only, right? And you didn't start off in sports. You started off in supplier diversity of all places, right? So when you have young women come up to you and ask you for advice, and they're like, how do I get in? How do I become C-level, whatever? What's your go-to advice that you give to them?
First, I think we need you gentlemen to stop looking at us as women. That's the first. We're brilliant, right? So there's a lot of brilliant, badass undergrads here who are looking to break into sports and entertainment. So the second I have to put the lens on it that I am female, that's not our problem. And this isn't directed to you. Thank you for throwing me this softball. That's not, and I get very passionate. That's not our problem. That's other people's problem, right? So continue to do the work, ladies. Continue to over-deliver. Continue to do what got you here and what got you successful. And one thing I wish I would have done, and for those that do know me, know that the phrase, the term, the life of living unapologetically is really important. Really try to be unapologetic about who you are and how you show up, right? And I wish I would have learned that earlier, but make sure you have a safe space to do it in. So that's where I ask those that are recruiting these women, make sure that you're creating a safe space for them, right? Because everybody talks about we want all this representation, inclusion, and equity, and bring your best self and bring your most authentic self. Well, sometimes y'all ain't ready because we're magical. We are so magical when we step in a room because we've had to overachieve for so long and doing it in badass hills, right? And so because we've had to do that, like you're not ready. You're not gonna be ready. But be ready because it's gonna lift you too. So ladies, continue to do what you've been doing, overachieve, be bold, be unapologetic about how you approach things. I met Magic Johnson here. We were talking about the documentary. So I'm working on a documentary with Matt Barnes and a few others, Rico Hines, on the famous runs that happened here in the off season in what we used to call Men's Gym. It's now called Student Activity Center. That's where I met Magic because I was bold and I walked up to him and I said, Irvin, I know you've started your health clinics. I was pre-med, y'all. I'd like to pick your brain. And fast forward, I'm wearing this championship ring because I was bold enough to approach him. So be bold, be confident. Know, and the last thing I'll say is don't worry about the outcome so much. Just know, be cocky and confident that you'll figure it out because the outcome will probably change.
I love that. So I want to thank you guys for doing the hardest part, which is the bat lead off, right? We are now fully live with the show. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Are you guys going to be here for more of the day? A little bit. So if you want to catch up to them later in the day, you'll see them around. Thank you so much. Hopefully you've learned a little bit and you're ready to go.
Thank you.